Okay, and
Cool.
in 3, 2, 1, hoping that the phone doesn't ring as soon as we start, but it's bound to. Hello, hi, how you doing? Yes, it's the Film File, the film show for film geeks, by film geeks, and roll music.
Dun 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 dun.
And we're back with another episode of the Film File, your friendly neighborhood film show. You know, for the inner film geek that's, well, it's in all of us, isn't it? Let's be honest. Oh, I hope you're well. We're doing fine. How are you doing, Andy? And there you go. There's the phone.
There's the phone.
I'll just.
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm still not getting out the house as much as I intend to. I'm still trying to get that motivation. But every time that I wake up thinking I'm going for a long walk today, I look out the window and it's raining. And then days when I've got things planned, like recording,
Like
it's beautiful
today.
out at the moment.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? It's a bit cold, I'll be
So
honest.
the weather is working against me in trying to get fit and healthy before I return to work. But I am getting there mentally and immersing myself into quite a lot of films and activities at the moment. It's been quite an active week for me.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I've just been busy. I don't know where the days have gone the last few days, and of course back to school for the kiddos, which is useful,
Yes.
and that's why
Oh,
we.
it frees up so much time.
Yeah, it does. And I was back in because I'm teaching a film course at the moment, so I was back in college. I just realised there's some students I'd not seen since last December before we broke up,
Oh,
which was weird. It was a bit of a head change. I was in for one day, the first day back in January, and that was it. But it does kind of feel like there's a sense of confidence to the first filming job I've done in a year since, well, a year ago, which was
it's
again weird just to get out there, and it felt kind of normal.
some kind of normal. Wow.
Which was,
But also, it was International Women's Day yesterday.
yeah, it
And it
was.
was great to see like discussion online around all the positivity of like women within the industry and the films that people asking, what's your favorite film by a female led director? And yeah, Point Break. Sorry, it always has to win.
And why
But
not?
yeah, but on the same day, where we had a very toxic community having a go at Meghan and Harry. So it's International Women's Day, let's celebrate women. But as soon as a woman says that she suffers from depression, put her down.
Yeah, I've avoided all that. I have little interest in sort of royals, but I avoided it like the plague. I've seen the discussions going on as I sit here, emails pinging around me, but I've just
It
avoided it.
Some of it is absolutely abhorrent. I've seen some comparisons of news headlines of Kate Middleton and similar instances of reporting about Meghan Markle, where it's like, oh, look at Kate wearing this daring dress with an off-the-shoulder look, and then as soon as it's Meghan, oh, she's smuttying up the royal family with this off-the-shoulder look, and I don't want to say it's about race, but it seems very clear that something about Meghan winds up the media. That Kate
Wonder
can
what
do
that could
things,
be.
but Meghan can't. I don't want to say it's about race, but it seems very strange. Anyway, I mean, I'm not a royalist by
Anyway,
any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that what is happening at the moment is abhorrent. Abhorrent.
yeah.
Wait until the seasons of The Crown get up to date with what's going on, and then we'll get the truth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, everybody's going to be waiting for that one. What we aren't including in this week, even though there is a nod somehow to the Crown in one news story, we'll be looking at our deep dive into The Predator and the subsequent sequels. We'll have reviews of films, including Coming to America. But before all that, yes, you know it's your favorite part of this show because Andy has been trawling the internet so you don't have to. Going into probably some of the deepest and darkest recesses that are out there just to bring you this
Some
sequence that
scary
we
places.
call sorry, I missed that line, that we call the news.
What do we call it again?
The news this year. And I've not watched Bridgerton. My other half did. She swooned at it in all the right places. and I think he's got a number 10 on the swoonometer right now.
I was wondering where you were going with the number 10 then. He's got a number
show.
10. It's okay. This will get edited.
All right. So, ready. Enjoying the show? Let's hope so. And if you're a regular listener and you've not subscribed, then please do so. Very easy to do. Just hit the subscribe button on your podcast platform, of choice. If you're new to the If you're new to the FilmFile, then just become a regular listener. You know you will oh my goodness, take a break for 2 minutes. If you're new to the FilmFile and you're enjoying what you're hearing, just become a part of the family. Come on, welcome you in. Next time we'll make you a cup of tea. If you want to drop us a line, you can do so
on Twitter at FilmFile UK, on Instagram FilmFile UK, or email us podcast@filmfile.uk.
And this week our deep dive is not into one film, but into a series of films, starting with the 1987 American sci-fi action film directed by John McTiernan and starring the man himself at the height of his power, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that film is Predator. And boy, do we have love for Predator. Andy, I mean, you watched this recently.
Yes.
Probably more so than I have. Before we talk about it, has Predator, the first film, held up, in your opinion?
Yes, very much so. I pop this on every few years, and when I popped it on this time, it was like I tend to do when we're going to be talking about it on the show. It's like, okay, I'm going to put my critical head on. I'm going to see if there's anything to not like about the film. But man, this is a film that was written on a script out of pure testosterone. It's packed with a cast that eat and drink testosterone for their meals. And it's a pure, unashamed macho fest, and it knows it. From the muscle off between Dutch, played by Arnie, and Dylan, played by Carl Weathers at the start of the film, to lines of dialogue about being a goddamn sexual tyrannosaur or not having time to bleed, it could be easy to write this film off as pure dumb action fun. And it is, but it's the kind of pure dumb action fun that's just perfect. It's utterly immersive and engrossing. The characters are what make this film. Even though they're all meatheads, you kind of like each of them and you kind of root for all of them as a result. You don't get to meet them for a long period before they start getting picked off one by one, but you genuinely care for this group of Marines sent in on a mission to extract, and that's where the film is smart. It's the way that it sets up.
Yeah, I mean, as a plot, it's a fantastically simple plot. A spacecraft flies near to Earth and releases an object which enters the atmosphere. Sometime later, in a Central America beach, Dutch, a retired Vietnam veteran played by Arnie, and his elite mercenary rescue team are tasked to rescuing a foreign cabinet minister and his aides who were being held hostage by insurgents. So you've got this one half of the film, which was a kind of very, very typical archetype of that particular 80s period, of being this all guys together action kind of buddy war movie that then moves into the science fiction territory. And it does that so well. And that's why it works. That's why it's still a classic, by having that seamless introduction of the Predator. And making what probably the hardest men on the planet suddenly become the victims. And that's where the fun begins, where no matter how much firepower these guys have, no matter how much testosterone they're carrying around in their huge muscular forms, they can't beat, or initially can't beat, this almost superhuman alien killer. As the film was originally called, The Hunter, the Predator does exactly that. He hunts them down.
It's like the concept for the Predator stalking them and taking them out one by one. It is pure slasher horror movie concept, but given a sci-fi spin, because you have the faceless killer that you don't actually see for most of the film. You just see quick glimpses of, and it's only towards the end that you get to unmask the killer. Every element of the slasher genre is within there, and it does it so well. The same way that Alien was a horror film first and a sci-fi second, this is a horror film first, sci-fi second, and so the characters are important. The marvelous design work of the creature itself by Stan Winston has to get a shout out here, because what a great concept. Apparently he got the idea for some of the design from it from a conversation he'd had previously with James Cameron when he was working with him on earlier films, particularly the mandibles that the Predator has on his face. And you look at the design of like things like Alien in the Xenomorph, shall I say. You look at the designs of the Xenomorph in the Alien franchise, and that's got a very phallic design. But it's very, very noticeably feminine, some of the aspects of the design of the facial features of the Predator. I'm not saying that women are all ugly predators with mandibles, but there's something definitely feminine in there. There is reference slightly in the second film.
Yeah, it's an iconic look, and it's an iconic look that's why it's so popular. I mean, if you don't get the creature right in Alien or Predator, then it instantly becomes a forgettable film. There's been some great science fiction horror movies, but to have a memorable villain like that, such a visual villain that can be plastered all over t-shirts, you can make action figures of, you can have models of, then that's when you know that it works, and it just carries that iconic legend to it. I mean, the interesting thing about this film, it started on the back end of a joke that was circulating around Hollywood, that since the end of Rocky IV, who was Rocky Balboa going to fight next? And it was joked that if we had him fight an alien in the fifth film, that would take it into an entirely new area. And scriptwriters Jim and John Thompson basically took their inspiration from that joke and wrote the screenplay, which was originally called Hunters. But I think it's the fact that Joel Silver was behind it, who was at that point the biggest mega producer in the world, who knew how to make great action movies. That, and working with John McTiernan, who's just brought, as he did, and this was his kind of showcase for Die Hard, brings us a comic book humor to it, which is never campy. And just in the same way that Die Hard it's got some real laugh out loud moments of it, and strange offbeat jokes in it. This works as well because of that. And of course, the fact that you've got Arnie, who was at the top of his game, the most recognizable star in the world at that particular point. It was destined to good things. It nearly went astray very early on with the design of the Predator, when Jean-Claude Van Damme had been originally cast to play the creature, and went on an intense training course, and he would bring his martial arts and his physical action to it, and to make the Predator very agile and almost ninja-like. But it didn't really work, and it became more apparent that he wasn't physically imposing enough to take on people like Schwarzenegger and Weathers. And then they recast it with the same actor, Kevin Peter Hall, who played Bigfoot in Harry and the Hendersons, who at 7'2" had that imposing, if not the huge physique, which was made out through the modeling, but the size, to be able to look down on those big guys. And it is just a film that is a time capsule of the period that it was made. But because it works, it doesn't matter when it came out. And like any great film, it had to create a franchise. And then we went into Predator 2.
So Predator 2 shifted the events to 1997, which at the time that the film came out was the future. And for me, I remember when I first saw this at the cinema, and even then I was like, oh, that was a bad move. Because in order to make things look near futuristic, it's things like bolting extra attachments onto guns for no point at all, which have no purpose, but it makes him look futuristic. Guns don't transform that much over a 50-year period, let alone 10 years. And the film looks dreadfully 80s as a result. And when I say dreadful, I mean it looks cheap and nasty, like a low-rent RoboCop setting rehashed for a monster movie. And the film takes more influence from the RoboCop franchise than what it did from Predator, because it tries for the political satire aspect, echoing the LA riots of the time and playing out the idea of gangs versus cops to the extreme. We also have overcrowded police stations because everyone's reporting a crime in the future, and an in-your-face news station getting the satirical dirt on everything. And in doing all that, it kind of forgets that it's supposed to be a Predator film. Aside from it being really hot, everyone is very sweaty in this film, and there's an invisible monster.
You see, I'm the opposite. I really like Predator 2, and I think it was the worthy sequel in the way that Aliens is a hang on is a worthy sequel the way that Aliens does by slightly shifting it in another direction. I like the LA setting, and I get that it's only 10 years after 1997 is a very different 1997 than what we remember about Los Angeles. But I like the fact that the editor, the editor, the Predator is now in the concrete jungle. And I know it did only moderately at the box office and it got generally mixed reviews. But I quite like the fact that they did something very, very bold with it. And they expanded on who the Predator is and tying it in with the Jamaican and Colombian drugs lords. I thought that the casting of Danny Glover was great. I know they originally wanted to get Schwarzenegger back. There was even talk of there's even talk of Patrick Swayze as the lead, but I think the casting of Danny Glover gives it that sort of hard, almost noir edge. And the fact that I've got an ex-girlfriend who's in the movie makes me like it that little bit more. But I've really got a lot of love for Predator 2. I've not seen it in a long time, so I know it's going to look dated, and I'll take all that on board. But I thought the fact that they did something different and went with a new way of telling a Predator story rather than going back to a jungle setting, I thought it was a bold sequel that almost nearly gets there.
I have no qualms with it shifting the setting to an urban setting. It's the tone of the film is so different to the original film. It just doesn't feel like part of the same franchise. The Predator itself bizarrely attacks in partly invisible ways. For some reason, all of its weapons end up on full show when it's attacking, because it wants to showcase off the effects more than anything else. It forgets that it's supposed to be the Predator hunting people. So why would his spear be visible floating in the air as he's about to attack? Makes no sense. And the Predator itself seems to be quite fond of being seen this time around. Every time someone spots his strange shimmering, he stands there and is pretty much just stood there going, yeah, okay, keep looking at me, keep looking at me. And then will deliberately jump ahead so that someone else can see them. I don't get the aspect. They were trying to show off the special effects more than anything else. I think that's where the problem is. You mentioned the casting. Cast are great. Danny Glover is fantastic. He plays that grizzled, aging cop routine perfectly, and he fits well in here. Bill Paxton plays a smarmy yet strangely charming and heroic character.
Which is just Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
As
and he's severely underused, and I would have loved to have seen more from him in the film. Gary Busey plays, well, Gary Busey, let's be honest, he just plays himself in every film. And he's generally, he plays like the FBI who are investigating the mysterious alien and getting in the way of the police. And it's got all the cliches of the action genre. Generally, I mean, I've got a card game called Movie Cliches, and I like when I'm watching old films to randomly deal myself 10 cards and see how many of the cliches I hit. And normally I score maximum about 7 out of 10. I scored 10 out of 10 within the first hour of this film from the random cards that I picked off, because it doesn't do anything new. It doesn't do anything original. It just regurgitates all the staple cliches of the genre, action genre, that he's trying to do. I get what they were doing, that they were trying to do what Alien and Aliens did, that they were two different kind of films, different approaches. One's a horror, one's an action film. But I don't think it quite worked as well. And it was probably more because Stephen Hopkins might have been a bit out of his element. I mean, this is the guy who gave us Nightmare on Elm Street 5. He didn't have a good track record. It would be a few years later when he gave us Judgment Night, and that's when I suddenly went, wow, this guy's actually got some potential talent.
But let's jump ahead now to 2010. To when you mentioned Predators 3, and I scratched my head thinking, I don't remember a Predators 3. Of course, there was the film Predators. This time follows an ensemble cast of characters again, with Adrian Brody in the lead as Royce, a mercenary who appears alongside a group of other proficient killers in an unidentified jungle. They find that they've been abducted and placed on a planet which acts as a game reserve for two warring tribes of extraterrestrial killers who actively look for a way, to survive and hopefully return to Earth. Produced by Robert Rodriguez, directed by
And
directed
Nimrod
by
Antal.
Nimrod, isn't it? Directed by Nimrod Antal. This was a surprising take on the Predator story, and the fact that they've, with each film, a little bit like Alien itself, they've gone in a completely different direction. It kind of underwhelmed at the box office, but I've got a lot of love for this one again because I think they did something different with it.
Yeah, I mean, Rodriguez produced this based on a script that he'd written back in the early 90s when he was working on Desperado, because he was pitching to try to make this sequel, and it took almost 2 decades before he finally got a chance to see it visualized. And he saw it as a film that would ignore the second film, but would be a direct sequel to the original. And you can see that in it. It starts off with a jungle setting, and it's only after about 20 minutes that we suddenly get the reveal as like, this isn't Earth. We just thought it was. And that's when it starts to play with the mythology. It builds up that there's different clans and tribes of predators that aren't necessarily working together. It has this whole aspect of not just humans, but also beasts are getting captured and dumped on this planet as a hunting ground for anything that's a natural killer. And whereas the first film had, like I've mentioned, the cast of characters were all likable, you kind of took to them, you rooted for them. You get to learn over this film that all of these lot are selfish and quite nasty people. And it adds a different spin because there's not just the aliens hunting them. You don't quite trust each other, and they're trying to band together, but one or two of them basically would kill you while you're asleep. There's a great cameo in this by Lawrence Fishburne, which unfortunately, as good as the cameo is, it breaks the film down a bit in the middle, and it slows down the pacing a slight bit. It drags on a bit unnecessarily. And I read stories that apparently they wanted Arnie to cameo in the film, and I wonder whether this was supposed to be the role that Arnie would have played, because he's playing someone who's been captured by the predators and survived for many, many seasons of hunting against them. And it would make sense, especially when you see the traps that Lawrence Fishburne's character had set up. They are the same traps that Arnie was setting up in the first film.
I think that is true. I've read two versions of the script. I've read the Rodriguez one, and I've read the rewrite by the writers who ended up getting credit for it. And Rodriguez always did want to bring in Arnie to replay Dutch, and I think if memory serves me right, you're spot on with that. But it's a lot of fun. It adds more to the Predator mythos. I don't think it feels out of place with the second one. I like the idea that it's set in a jungle again, and I like the fact that it gives you familiarity and then does something absolutely unique with it. And it's a shame that it didn't become a bigger hit. I know it did okay, but it's a shame that it just wasn't the hit that it deserved to be. 'Cause unfortunately, after that, we move on to Predators, which I haven't seen because
The
you've
Predator.
talked me out. Sorry. And now we have to move on to the Predator, which I haven't seen because you talked me out of it, even though I am a huge, absolutely huge mental Shane Black fan and Fred Decker fan. And so I'm going to let you rant now.
I mean, I covered the Predator in a lot of detail in one of the early episodes, and I think it's also on the compilation of Just the Reviews number 3 when you can hear the full review. But the biggest problem with this film is I'm a huge Shane Black fan, and it was clear when watching it that Shane Black had been reined in a bit, and he hadn't had full control over this film because it feels disjointed. It feels like a mess of ideas. If I was to say that I didn't like Predator 2 that much when I rewatched it, Predator 2 would be a 5 out of 5 film compared to The Predator, which would be a 2 out of 5 at best. That's how bad the film is. It tried to be funny and failed. It tried to have great action moments, which didn't quite work. They were really hidden in dark settings. There's no consistency to the story, and it tries to be really clever towards the end with a big mystery item that's been found and discovered, and when it opens up, and it's like, oh, we're setting up a sequel. And that's where it lets itself down, in the same way that the recent Terminator films have all tried to be the first part of a 3-part series and failed by forgetting they're supposed to just be a film on their own first. The Predator suffers from franchise-itis. It wants to be a start of a new franchise. And in doing so, it lays out so many little nuggets that it will never pay off. A mess of a film.